Just because you're really good at managing your time at work does not save you from experiencing burnout, especially if you have a lot of emotional labor at work or a people-pleasing tendency or other energy leaks. You need to start to learn how to protect your energy, and this has nothing to do with your calendar. I'm going to talk to you about 5 ways you can start to protect your energy at work so that you can feel more vibrant and have the space in your day to deal with everything that's coming at you. More importantly, it's a way to start moving away from that experience of burnout. One of the biggest myths that I have to bust when I'm coaching professionals is that time is going to save them from experiencing burnout or high levels of stress. If you've watched my other videos, you know that stress on its own isn't necessarily what contributes to burnout. Burnout can be caused by unfulfilling work or just giving so much energy and so much effort that you stop having enough. Your bucket is empty. The good news is that after going through this myself and then coaching clients on it, I've identified some areas where we have very typical energy leaks that make us feel more exhausted than we need to during our day. I'm going to phrase this in the terms of boundaries, and where you can start to put a little bit of boundaries around you to protect these energy leaks. The first one is the mental space boundary. I fell so hard into this one. Checking email after work hours just because I was curious, or I was just scrolling, or checking in with Slack messages. It is so tempting to continue to check, especially when you have a really exciting project or you're really involved with something. The problem is that you're not giving yourself an opportunity to rest, to revitalize. And that is so crucial. We have this broken idea that if we just keep on keeping on, if we just keep on checking things, if we keep on working on something, that the problem will get solved. When in reality, sleeping on it or giving it time is a much better approach. You can come into a situation with more creativity, with more energy. And I've had instances where I've solved what I thought was an enormous problem in 1 minute just because I was revitalized. How do we create a little bit of boundary or space for ourselves away from the problems we experience at work? We need to stop working when we stop working. This includes ruminating, maybe even talking about it if it's unnecessary, and certainly checking and responding to emails. Something that really helped me, and I've trained my clients on, is to create an end of the day ritual. Right now, it's so tricky if you're working from home because work is right there. Mine is right next to my kitchen, actually. So it's really tempting to just pop back in for a second. I had to create a really big ritual where I close everything that's work related. Sometimes I create a different screen on my computer where I can put all my work stuff, and then I put everything away and close the door. This signals to me that it's time to end work. Now listen, this might get a little tricky if you have unintentionally trained your managers or colleagues or subordinates to know that you will respond quickly, even off hours. So at first they might get a little bit weird or concerned if they don't hear from you immediately. I would really encourage you to communicate what you are doing. I really truly believe in modeling this type of behavior with boundaries and healthy workplaces. So saying something like, I'm making a concerted effort to spend time away from work so that I can come back more revitalized. I will only be checking emails up until this hour for the next week. I do suggest maybe not going cold turkey. It might not feel good for you, and it might help you, those who depend on you right now off hours, to get adjusted to your new behavior. The next one was huge for me. It was the emotional labor boundary. I'm a natural coach. I love talking to people, and people naturally tend to open up to me, which is great. However, sometimes it takes a lot of energy out of me if someone's sharing a deep personal problem in a work setting where I should be concentrating on something else. It's not just the time that it takes, but I get really involved and it takes a lot out of me. So I had to learn to put an emotional labor boundary up, meaning that maybe those conversations happened at lunch instead or after work. Also, if you know this is you and maybe it's happening a little bit more than you'd like, I want you to change your mindset that you are not the fixer on the team. You're not the go-to therapist, because you probably already do that in your personal life with your friends and family anyway, and you can get that fulfillment there. So something you can say to start creating this boundary is to say, this sounds really tough. I want to give you all my attention. Could we chat about this after work or at lunch? Right now I have this project I really need to concentrate on. So you're not saying, hey, stop talking to me. You're giving other options. In my professional boundaries program, I go deeper into other scripts you can use if you needed to stop completely. What I found setting this boundary for myself was that I could actually show up more of that helper, more of that coach in my deeper relationships after hours. So by being able to protect that energy at work, I was able to then show up deeper and in a more meaningful way with those I truly loved. Number 3, the energetic people boundaries. You know, there are people in our lives that fill us up with energy and joy. We leave conversation feeling alive, feeling full, and unfortunately, on the opposite spectrum, there are people who drain us, people who we have a small exchange with and we feel empty or hurt or negative. Those kind of energy leaks impact us deeply as we go into our creative work mode. You probably already in your mind identifying those people at work. Try to minimize your interaction with them. Be kind, be open if you need to be, but also maybe you don't have that additional chat with them after work. Maybe you don't sit next to them at lunch. Maybe you start to wean off with those conversations so that they stay only professional and you don't interact in that small chit chat way anymore. This really helps protect your energy. Think about how drained you might feel from one interaction and what that feels like when you now have to go into a project where you have to be truly present with a client or solve a problem that requires creativity. That again will take so much energy out of you, so you're feeling constantly depleted. The next one, the 4th boundary, is the self-expectation boundary. This is a big one. I work with so many professionals who are self-proclaimed perfectionists, and I completely get it because I'm one too. It's so hard. We have such high expectations for ourselves because we know we can do better. We know it's important to us to do better. However, that constant over-preparing, that rehearsing before meetings, or the over editing of an email and rereading it 100 times takes a lot of energy out of us. It really feels so draining, and let's be honest, it rarely actually adds or makes a difference to our workflow or to how we do our work. I challenge you to start learning when good enough is good enough. There are certain projects where you will use that tool of perfectionism, when you can use that detailed brain of yours to its maximum. So don't drain it on unnecessary tasks like that editing of emails that I used to do. It drove me nuts. So I want you to make a commitment to yourself right now. Think of one thing that you do at work that you don't need to be overdoing, where you're overthinking, overanalyzing. And I challenge you to commit to yourself to stop it, or to do it half as much. And pay attention. See if it really impacts your work as much as your fear might be telling you it would. I bet you won't even see a difference. This last boundary was the one that changed it all for me, and I would never go back. It's the capacity awareness boundary. It's not a boundary you necessarily set with others. It's deeply personal, and it takes a little bit more time to develop. I work deeply with clients to understand where their capacity is at. How I approach this with my clients, I get them to take an entire week and look at their calendar. After each task that they do, they reflect back whether they feel completely drained, slightly tired, a little bit energized, maybe a little filled up. They start to really engage and pay attention to where their energy level is at. And they make those notes all week long. That allows us to really reflect and see what tasks take more energy. What do they have less capacity for? So, for example, I'm a natural coach. I love being around people. I'm an extrovert. And so interacting with people, being in meetings typically fills me up. Great. However, I've worked with a colleague who would come out of the same meetings as me, and here I'd be like bouncing off the walls, and she would just be drained, and she would need to go into her office and close the door and be by herself for a while. So you have to know yourself and pay attention, because then if I'm fully energized, that might be a great time for me to go and do something that takes a little bit more energy. Maybe it's a good time for me to be creative or be present with someone who takes more energy out of me. On the opposite side, if I know that I have a day full of tasks that are going to take a lot of energy out of me, things like having to problem solve something really intense, really maybe scary, or maybe there's fear or frustration coming up as well. Those emotions take a lot out of us. So we can expect them and manage them in a way that maybe we then do a task that fills us up, or we know we're going to need a slightly longer break afterwards. This type of energy management and capacity management creates a rhythm in your workday that helps you close off those leaks and pay better attention to what your natural flow is. What I see is when I work with professionals, they have a very high expectation of themselves, and they assume that they need to be able or should be able to just deal with the hardest things all day long. The reality is, though, none of us are built that way. And what fills one person up might drain you, and there's nothing wrong with that if you manage it well. I really encourage you to either do this for yourself. Feel free to book a call with me. We can do this together, but let's figure out a rhythm that works for you. This is such a beautiful way to start to get away from burnout and to identify maybe some things externally that might be leading us into burnout. The most important thing I want you to take away is that your career is not over and you're not broken just because you're experiencing some of these symptoms of burnout. I talk about more of this in this next video.